All right, so are you ready to unlock like the secrets behind talent?
Aha.
Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And this book is seriously like a game changer. So it turns out talent isn't some mystical thing you're born with. Like, it's something you can actually build.
What I think is so fascinating is how Coyle traveled all over the world. I mean, from these tiny villages in Brazil to like famous music schools, really just trying to understand what makes these talent hotbeds tick. And what he found is that it all comes down to something called deep practice.
Deep practice. Okay, that sounds kind of intense. So it's not just about practicing for hours on end.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not just about mindlessly repeating something. It's about slow, focused, effortful practice where you're constantly pushing your limits and correcting those mistakes.
Okay, that makes sense. I remember the book talks about this young violinist who learns way faster by breaking down the song and really just focusing on those challenging sections.
Right? It's about working smarter, not just harder. And that's where the concept of myelin comes in. It's this fatty substance in the brain that acts like insulation for your neural pathways.
So myelin, how does that work?
So think of your brain like a complex network of wires. Every time you practice a skill correctly, you're essentially strengthening those connections. Myelin is what helps those signals travel faster and smoother, making you more efficient and skilled.
So the more you practice a skill the right way, the more myelin wraps around those neural pathways, making you better, faster.
Precisely. And it's not just about speed, it's also about precision and fluidity. That's why those Brazilian futsal players who train in these like tight, chaotic spaces develop such incredible ball control. They're constantly pushing their brains and building those myelin-coated pathways.
That's a really cool example. So it's not about some predetermined genetic advantage. It's about creating the right conditions for deep practice and myelin growth. But you need more than just practice, right? What about motivation? You can't force someone to go through the struggle of deep practice if they're not driven.
Absolutely. Coyle calls this ignition, that spark of inspiration that fuels the hard work. And he has some amazing examples. Michelangelo's childhood obsession with sculptures, the surge in Korean golfers after Sari Pak's historic win, Clarissa Davis, the basketball player who was inspired by seeing other black athletes on TV.
It's about representation. Seeing someone like you who has achieved greatness. I can see how that would be incredibly motivating.
Personal identity plays a huge role in motivation. If you can see yourself as a future expert, you're much more likely to put in the effort. It becomes a part of who you are. So we have deep practice and ignition. But what about the role of coaching? Does everyone need a Mr. Miyagi to unlock their potential?
Well, maybe not Mr. Miyagi specifically, but good coaching can definitely make a huge difference. Coyle talks about these master coaches, people like the legendary basketball coach John Wooden, known for his super precise feedback style.
It's like having a sculptor for your skills. They can see the raw potential and guide you towards mastery.
That's a great analogy. So a great coach challenges you, offers encouragement, provides tailored feedback, and knows when to push or support.
Exactly. They help you stay in what Coyle calls the Goldilocks zone of learning, where the challenge is just right, not too easy, not too hard. So it's not just about finding any coach. It's about finding the right coach, someone who can help you unlock your specific talents.
So we've got deep practice, which is all about focused, effortful practice that builds myelin. We've got ignition, that spark of inspiration that fuels the hard work. And finally, we have master coaching, which provides guidance and feedback along the way. So we know the ingredients, but how do we actually put these principles into practice in our own lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The good news is Coyle gives us some practical steps we can actually follow. He breaks down deep practice into 3 key rules: chunking, repetition, and feeling it.
Okay, let's unpack those. Chunking, I'm guessing that's about breaking down a skill into smaller, more manageable pieces.
Yeah.
Kind of like instead of trying to learn an entire song on the piano, you focus on mastering a specific chord progression first.
Get it? It's about isolating those tricky parts and really working on them until they become like second nature. And then there's repetition. Now, this isn't about mindless drilling. It's about focused intentional practice where you're constantly evaluating, making tiny adjustments, and refining as you go.
So quality over quantity when it comes to repetition, I can get behind that. But what about that third rule, feeling it? That sounds a bit more abstract. Is that about being emotionally connected to the practice somehow?
It's about being present, engaged, not just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. If you're learning a language, don't just repeat phrases like a robot, try to connect with the sounds, the rhythm, the emotion behind the words. Or if you're playing piano, really feel the music flowing through your fingers. It's about tapping into that deeper level of awareness.
So deep practice is like a recipe. You've got these 3 key ingredients: chunking, repetition, and feeling it. Okay, that makes sense. But what about ignition? How do we
Mhm.
find that spark, that motivation, especially if we're feeling stuck or just plain uninspired?
Coyle talks about looking for primal cues, things that trigger a deep emotional connection to a skill or a field. Remember Clarissa Davis, the basketball player? Seeing those black athletes on TV wasn't just about representation. It hit her on a deep emotional level. It was a primal cue that ignited her passion.
It makes you realize the power of role models, right? Seeing someone who inspires you can make you believe that you can achieve greatness too. And Coyle also talks about the importance of setting high expectations for yourself.
Absolutely. And surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, who challenge you to push your limits, can create this incredible upward spiral of growth. It's like you're all lifting each other up. And don't underestimate the power of a sense of belonging. Feeling like you're part of a community, a tribe of people who share your passion, that can be incredibly motivating.
This makes me think about those talent hotbeds Coyle visited, like the Brazilian soccer fields and the Russian tennis academies. It's not just about individual effort, it's about the environment, the culture of excellence that surrounds these athletes.
Precisely. And that's something we can all create. It doesn't have to be a fancy academy. It could be at home, at work, in your community. We can build these supportive, challenging environments that encourage deep practice,
Yeah.
ignite that passion, and just accelerate growth.
So bring it back to master coaching. How do we find these mentors, these guides who can help us on this journey of developing our talents? Do we all need to hire some expensive coach or trainer?
Not at all. Master coaches come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
They could be teachers, mentors, colleagues, even friends or family members. The key is to look for those qualities we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Someone who challenges you, provides constructive feedback, and believes in you.
And they need to be able to apply that Goldilocks effect, right? Keeping the challenge level just right so you're constantly pushing yourself without feeling overwhelmed or discouraged.
It's all about finding that sweet spot. Too easy, you get bored too hard, you get frustrated. But when the challenge is just right, you enter that magical zone where real learning takes place.
You know, this whole conversation has been so eye-opening. The talent code has really changed my perspective on talent and how it's developed. It's not about luck or genetics. It's about understanding the science behind it and applying these principles. But I feel like there's one more piece of the puzzle we haven't touched on yet: mindset. Does Coyle talk about the importance of having a growth mindset?
He definitely does.
Mm.
Throughout the book, he emphasizes the importance of believing that talent is not fixed, but malleable. You can always learn and grow. He encourages us to embrace the struggle, to see mistakes not as failures, but as opportunities to improve.
That's so important. It's easy to get discouraged when we hit a roadblock or things get tough. But if you have that growth mindset, you can reframe those setbacks as stepping stones on the path to mastery.
That's the beauty of the talent code.
Yeah.
It gives us the power to become architects of our own talent, to cultivate greatness in ourselves and the people around us.
Okay, so we've talked about deep practice, ignition, master coaching, and even mindset. But for you listening, how can we actually put all of this into practice in our everyday lives?
I think the first step is to reflect on your own goals and aspirations. What skills do you want to develop? What areas of your life do you want to excel in? Once you have that vision, you can start applying these principles.
So if you're trying to learn a new language, you could apply the principles of deep practice by breaking it down into smaller chunks, practicing consistently, and finding ways to really immerse yourself in the language.
Exactly. Find a language partner or tutor who can give you feedback and guidance, becoming your own personal master coach. And don't forget about ignition. Find ways to connect with the language on a deeper level, maybe by watching movies, listening to music, or connecting with native speakers.
You know, this is making me think about my own guitar playing. I've always wanted to get better, but I've never really committed to deep practice. I just kind of noodle around playing the same old songs, and maybe it's time to break out of that rut and embrace the struggle.
That's the spirit, remember. The struggle is where the magic happens. It's in those moments of pushing beyond our comfort zone that we build myelin, strengthen those neural connections, and really master our craft.
This deep dive has been so insightful. The talent code has completely changed how I think about talent and how it develops. It's not about luck or genetics. It's about understanding the science and applying these principles to unlock your potential.
I totally agree. And I hope everyone listening feels inspired to embrace this journey of talent development and unlock their full potential.
Before we wrap things up, though, there's one concept from the book I think is worth exploring a little more: the Goldilocks effect.
Ah, yes, the Goldilocks effect. It's so crucial. When it comes to deep practice, remember, it's about finding that sweet spot where the challenge is just right, not too easy and not too hard.
So how do we know if we're in that Goldilocks zone? Are there any signs we should look out for?
That's a great question. And the answer is it depends. Everyone's Goldilocks zone is different, and it can even change over time as you progress. What was challenging for you yesterday might feel easy today.
So what works for one person might not work for another. Makes sense.
Exactly. It's so important to pay attention to your own internal feedback. How are you feeling during practice? Are you engaged? Are you challenged? Are you making progress?
It's about finding that balance between effort and enjoyment. You should feel challenged, but not overwhelmed. You should be pushing yourself, but not to the point of frustration.
Exactly. If you find yourself getting bored or complacent, it might be a sign that you need to increase the challenge. On the other hand, if you're constantly frustrated, it might be a sign to scale back and focus on mastering those fundamentals.
So it's this constant process of adjustment, fine-tuning your practice to stay in that Goldilocks zone. But how do you know when you found it? What does it feel like to be in that sweet spot of learning?
In my experience, it feels like a state of flow. You're totally absorbed in what you're doing, time seems to fly by, and you're making noticeable progress without feeling strained or overwhelmed.
It's that feeling of being in the zone where everything just clicks. I've definitely experienced that with my writing when the words are just flowing and I feel totally immersed in the creative process.
And that's the beauty of the Goldilocks effect. It's not just about skill development. It's about finding that state of optimal performance where you're fully present and engaged in whatever you're doing.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about enjoying the journey along the way. That's a powerful message for all of us, no matter what we're trying to learn or achieve.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that learning and growth should be a joyful experience. When we find that Goldilocks zone, we unlock our true potential and create this amazing cycle of progress and fulfillment.
This deep dive into the talent code has been so insightful. We've covered so much deep practice ignition master, coaching mindset, and the Goldilocks effect. The biggest takeaway for me is that talent isn't something you're born with. It's something you cultivate through effort, dedication, and the right approach.
Couldn't agree more. And I hope everyone listening feels empowered to embrace this journey of developing their talents, seeking out those Goldilocks zones in their own lives.
That's a great note to end on, but before we go, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. Think about a skill you're working on right now or a goal you're striving for. Are you in that Goldilocks zone? Are you pushing yourself enough without feeling overwhelmed? Remember, the sweet spot for growth lies right at the edge of your comfort zone. So go out there, embrace the challenge, find your Goldilocks zone, and unlock your true potential. Until next time, keep diving deep.